All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Dalby, and I work for the Kansas Department of Agriculture and get the pleasure of assisting with the Kansas Junior Livestock Show Lead Challenge. So we thank you all for joining our second Listen and Learn this evening. Before we do get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this Zoom is being recorded. It's for those to view later and be able to fill out their survey. If you have a question, you are more than welcome to type it in the chat, which is a little icon found at the bottom of your screen. Or at the end of the presentation, you're welcome to unmute yourself and put yourself on camera and ask the question live. Secondly, make sure that after this presentation that you fill out the participation survey to receive your participation points. The survey will ask your name, your age division, and one question about what you learned during the session. The survey links will be available on the KJLS website. So today's session is titled Stress in Agriculture. We have the pleasure of listening to our Deputy Secretary for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Kelsey Olson. So Kelsey, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you today and this evening, and those of you who will be watching at a later time. I appreciate your interest in the subject and your interest in participating in the lead challenge. Before we dive in, we're going to talk about stress in agriculture, something that we've probably all experienced in one way. I know it's stressful as we prepare for our upcoming shows, but I want to address that stress and think about maybe why it's stressful, and share a little bit about what the agency is doing to help promote those discussions and support our farmers and ranchers in the state. So to get started, I'm going to click my next button. Sorry, we were having technical difficulties earlier and there we go. All right, I'm going to first play you one of the ads that perhaps you've heard recently on social media or driving across the state as you attend your shows. So we'll start here.
Agriculture is your livelihood. It's who you are. Caring for your farm can be demanding, but the days are even tougher if you're not okay. When the worry won't quit or the darkness is overwhelming, when you don't feel like yourself and can't see a way out, it's time to speak up. Hard to find the words? It only takes 3. I need help. Start today at kansasagstress.org. That's kansasagstress.org. Agriculture is your livelihood.
All right, well, before we dive in a little bit more about that advertisement that's been running, I wanted to share just a little bit of highlights about Kansas agriculture. Many of you might be very familiar with this information, so hopefully it's nothing too new and earth-shattering, but I just kind of wanted to remind you of the importance that agriculture plays in our state. So when we stop and think about the different types of agriculture, there are 72 different sectors. This can be certainly beef cattle, this can be ranching, milling, breweries, even pet food manufacturing. Some people actually like to call the state of Kansas the pet food capital of the world. We have a large concentration of pet food manufacturers. One of the things that has drawn those industries to the state is the abundance of some of those input ingredients, such as our corn and our soybeans and our wheat, as if we have a lot of grain-based pet food. Anyway, there's lots of different sectors that make up Kansas agriculture. And when we stop and think about what does that mean in a tangible sense, we calculate that there's roughly $67 billion of economic contribution to Kansas based on agriculture. That's a pretty big number. And when we stop and think about our workforce, it's roughly 12% of the workforce and just shy of 240,000 employees who work in agriculture in one way or another. So when we talk about agriculture, it means something to the state, and it matters to you and me and to our livelihoods. just breaking that information down just a little bit further, there's 58,569 Kansas farms. This accounts for roughly 90% of all the land in Kansas. But you might find it interesting that the average farm size is only 781 acres. Most of the Kansas farms and ranches are family owned, much like you in your own situation. And when we start doing some of the numbers, there's approximately 2.3 employees on each farm. That could count for you. That could count for your parents. It's pretty easy to start getting to that 2.3 number when we really pause and think about who's contributing day in and day out. So what makes agriculture stressful? You and I know inherently there's a lot of stress that happens in agriculture. There's uncontrollable factors such as the weather, our commodity prices, our input supply prices. These are factors that we cannot control day in and day out, but we have to endure and overcome on a daily basis. Then there's mitigation options when we stop and think about the cost of crop insurance, what to buy it to not to buy it. Do we apply our fertilizer now? Do we use a post-emergent herbicide, or do we space something after use a seed that's already has a pre-emergent on it? There's lots of things that we can try to do to mitigate those risks, to reduce that weed pressure, to reduce the stress on our cattle that that might be moving from during weaning time. There's lots of things that we take into consideration, and sometimes we don't always think about that those decisions that we're making day in and day out are very stressful. Something that's also unique about agriculture is that it's often isolating. We often live in rural areas where the nearest neighbor might be several miles away. And if you're working full-time in agriculture, you might be one of those two people or less than two people that interact daily with the operation. And so it can be very isolating. I don't know about you, but I like to relax sometimes by talking to my friends or visiting with family. And when we don't have that access to that, to those other people on a regular basis, it can be stressful and not being able to collaborate. When we stop and think about what that farmer and rancher does, they're wearing many hats. They're maybe that animal health technician trying to decide, do I call the vet? Do I not call the vet? Am I going to plant soybeans next year? Or am I going to plant corn next year? When am I going to put that bull in with the herd after I AI'd? Maybe I don't have a herd bull for cleanup. That's going to be stress as we consider those factors. Stepping back and thinking about, I'm a conservationist. I want to protect my pastures. I've got to be a technician to work on the tractor or to fix the machinery that we have going. There's lots of different roles that the farmer and rancher fills on a day-to-day basis. And then of course we talk about seasonal responsibilities. It's calving season. That calf's going to come whether you're there or not, and even if it's 10 below outside. So we have to endure that stress, those weather items that we can't overcome. But agriculture, farming, ranching continues and must go on. And of course, I mentioned a little bit earlier the costs. It's expensive to purchase that semen that you specifically want to use, or as we are looking at what the cost of our soybean prices, our seed prices that are going into the ground. There's a lot of costs associated with the day-to-day farming and ranching. So when I stop and think about just kind of that psyche, what's going on in our farmers and ranchers' heads, we know that this job is stressful, but a lot of people find their personal identity in their job, in being a rancher, in being a showman. That's where our pride comes from. That's how we see ourselves. Oftentimes, where you're working is also where you're living. That show barn's probably not too far from the house. And so if you're mad at your heifer for not behaving, you can't really escape it. Those are stresses. Those are things that are different in agriculture than when maybe you leave and go to a job that's full-time away from home, working with not family members. And when we put distance between our home and our work, that provides a little barrier sometimes, or a buffer when it comes to the stressful conversations that we might have if there's an upcoming decision or if something didn't go our way. But on the farm and the ranch, those conversations are right there where we live, where we work, day in and day out. And of course, when we think about succession planning, that's a big thing. If you're thinking about taking over the farm from your parents, or if you're in the transition period, if your family's maybe going through a transition period from one generation to the next, that's difficult. It's difficult to think about. It can be difficult to talk about. And sometimes it's difficult to be mad at your loved ones. So these are all factors that when we think about farming and ranching, these are different than, say, other industries. If I have a construction job, I go to the site, I build my construction project. At the end of the day, I leave and I go home. That's not the same for farm families and ranchers. And of course, then you see the other bullet there, I failed to mention the startup costs for young farmers. So if you're just getting into this industry, it can be daunting, the startup costs that you might feel like you need. Or, you know, when we're talking about the beef cattle industry, do we have a show barn? Do we have those coolers we're putting our cattle in to grow the hair in the summer months? You might feel the pressure to be like the neighbor or someone else down the road, but we can't all afford that. I know my kids certainly don't have, are not awarded those opportunities on our own farm with our own cattle. So I know what that stress is like, and it can be a lot to handle and to overcome. Something else that is specifically unique to farming and ranching, and I have to admit my slides are a little bit heavy to the farming side tonight, and I apologize for that. But when we just stop and think about what's on the farm, we have grain bins. Grain bins can be very dangerous. There's large equipment, hay bale grinders. Of course, you know firsthand that you're dealing with a live animal that is, no matter how hard we try, is going to do its own thing at the most inopportune time. I know I've had my foot stepped on more than once by a heifer, and in the, you know, as we're working cattle, or getting kicked by a calf. That's dangerous. Those are factors that not everyone always experiences at their job. Me personally, my day-to-day job, as the deputy secretary, I'm often in an office building or in a meeting setting. It's not very often that my coworker comes by and stomps my foot or leaves a black and blue mark on my shin. That's something different and unique in farming and ranching. There's a couple other items there. Being in agriculture means that we work around chemicals much more commonly, or medicines, than maybe some of our friends who don't have animals or don't live on a farm, and access to firearms. I know that many of you probably maybe own your own guns even, but you've been taught gun safety and you know how to be around them. Nonetheless, those are extra dangers that we are exposed to on a routine basis on a farm and ranch. So why does this all matter? Well, when working at the Kansas Department of Agriculture, we said that it was important to, one, help bring recognition to the fact that agriculture is stressful. Our state suicide rates are going up. When we stop and look at the industries in which they're the highest, it's farming, ranching, and as our federal partners include fishing and forestry. We don't typically think about those in Kansas, but it is a sector that is, it's farming, fishing, ranching, and what did I just say? I apologize. Forestry. We wanted to do something to help combat that. we wanted to help destigmatize the conversation around stress in agriculture. So we created the kansasagstress.org website. This website is not a website that teaches you how to be less stressful. It's there to provide resources to help when you are stressed, to help support your family members when they might be stressed, and just to help destigmatize the conversation around stress in agriculture. The other important thing to note here is that, well, you might say, Kelsey, I know these things. I know it's stressful. I know it hurts when I get kicked. But you know what? Our friends and neighbors who might not be involved in agriculture don't understand this. And just like we talk about telling our story about why we do what we do, it's also important to talk about why farming and ranching is different and different types of stress than what our friends in town might experience or might understand.
My personal experience with stress in agriculture.
All right, I paused. Sorry, it jumped too quick on me. So this slide, this video that we're sharing is one of the videos that we have created this summer to help destigmatize the conversation. This family that you're seeing here is from North Central Kansas and had a personal situation that they were willing to share, and we were able to work with. So watch this short 30-second ad or video and learn about their story.
My personal experience with stress in agriculture is my father took his life. It was a stressful life that he had, and he poured everything that he had into the farm, into our family, and it caught up to him. And I think he was in a place where he felt alone, and he felt that he wasn't providing for us the way that we deserved, and we saw it differently.
So if you're curious to know more about Nick's story, we have a 3-minute video that dives a little bit deeper into his story. You can find that at the kansasagstress.org website. But our goal with this website was, as I mentioned, to provide resources and awareness around the subject. I know growing up personally on a farm and ranch, we didn't talk about being stressed. I may have seen my family stressed. I may have seen the times that we were yelling at each other while we were working calves, or something on the planter broke and it was, whoever's fault for not catching it sooner. I certainly saw those stressors and experienced those stressors, but we, in agriculture, we as a society have not always talked about mental health and about our whole health and our awareness and addressing the fact that we deal with stress on a day-to-day basis. So we wanted to address that. And as I mentioned, our suicide rates are high in the state, and that's not acceptable. I don't want to lose another friend. I'm sorry, getting myself choked up here. Our lives matter. So to do that, to say that it matters, we started this website. We launched in the fall of 2019. We started with a very, very small budget. We knew that this was something that was worth doing, and it didn't matter how much it cost, but we didn't really have a lot to work with. So our staff worked very hard during the 6 weeks time period to help identify what some of those existing resources were, reach out to partners who we might not have collaborated with in the past, and then try to provide resources to Kansas farmers and ranchers about mental health, about stress in agriculture. As time has gone on, we've grown the website, and we continually maintain an update on a regular basis. Some of the categories that we have listed here, you can see the different types across. And I think it's important to point out, just as I mentioned earlier, growing up on a farm, I saw the stress, dealt with the stress that comes with living and being part of agriculture. But stress affects everyone in the family. It affects maybe the generation that has handed off the operation to the next one. They're stressful, they're concerned they're not making decisions as they have done, or maybe something's been changing. Are youth, you are impacted by stress, whether it's coming home from a stressful school day and still having to take care of our farm, or just experiencing that stress day to day with that we might see our families deal. There's resources out there for everyone, and they vary. There's all types of resources. Going through some of the pieces, we have local and national resources available. Sometimes our finances are what's stressful, right? Those costs are high, or sometimes it's maybe I don't have as much money as I want to afford that new trailer. There's financial counseling that's available out there. There's even legal assistance. Maybe you're striking a new partnership up. Maybe you want to invest in your operation with your family, or there's been rocky paths. There's resources available to help navigate some of those stresses and help take the burden off, so that you don't have to know everything that's out there. And of course, we have some other things like food insecurity resources, substance abuse resources, farm assistance as we go through. One of the things that I think has been a really neat outcome from this is the Ag Aware. So as we've partnered with many different groups in building this website, Kansas Corn has been one of them, and one of them that has really taken a lead in the conversation. When I started having conversations about mental health and stress in agriculture, individuals who had shared their story and shared about the struggles, they often shared that they were nervous about going and seeking professional help. And how did they know if they were going to find someone who understood their livelihood? I had one gentleman share to me, it took him 3 sessions explaining why going and getting a job in town was not going to be a solution to his problem. So Kansas Corn has worked to help identify mental health providers across the state who have backgrounds in agriculture or have some agriculture understanding. So when we walk in that door and we want to talk about the cattle were out last night and I fixed the fence for the umpteenth time and why that is stressful, they're going to have a little bit of grasp and not ask, well, why does it matter if the bull was with the heifers? These types of questions or these types of problems that we understand, and that's no-brainers to us, these providers are going to help navigate that conversation much quicker, and with more situational awareness. So currently, we have 22 different Ag Aware providers that have been identified in the state, and we are proud to say that number continues to grow on a regular basis. One of the other things that's out there is there's lots of different hotlines. There was in the fall of 2019, as we were launching our website, there was a national movement for us to work in multi-state collaborations to provide additional resources to farmers and ranchers. One of the outcomes for that in the Midwest was Iowa State University Research and Extension providing their existing hotline to provide access to Kansas as well as other states in our area. So with this hotline, you can call this number and you can talk to somebody who has a little bit of understanding with agriculture. It's a warm line that it's going to be met with on the end with somebody who you can talk to, and they can help refer you on if you just need to call someone at the spur of a moment. So this number, as the regional hotline, is one that we help promote. I'm also proud to say that after we launched this website, if you think fall 2019, life was normal back then. And then when the spring of 2020 hit, we had to pause and rethink about how we did everything in our lives due to COVID. Part of that conversation was some funding from the national level through HR 133 bill passed to provide extensive funding to state departments of agriculture to help support the conversation around mental health and stress in agriculture. So starting in the fall of 21, Kansas received $500,000 to help support a campaign that increased awareness for our website. And we were focused on running this campaign and to destigmatize the mental health issues in farming in the agriculture industry. The radio ad and the video that you saw earlier are two of the projects that we compiled and worked on with a professional ad agency to develop those resources. So it was exciting to actually get some funding to put towards this. So a little bit more we've ran a statewide media campaign. Hopefully you've heard the TV or radio spots. There have been direct mailers. There's been a lot of paid advertising on social media. We have also been able to purchase some stress reduction tools. Those being stress balls. We often think of them just as fun, stress balls to have or to have on our desk or to throw at our friend, but they do help. There's medical articles that prove that squeezing that stress ball can be an instant form of stress relief. And then of course we have, logistics things of project oversight of mailing costs and update maintenance and domain names. But we launched our campaign in early 22 through some digital ads and social media, and we kicked off the official campaign. But if we think about what happened in late December of 21, we had some wildfires that impacted several different counties across our state, and many of our farm families and ranchers were directly impacted. We knew that it was important to pivot and to try and provide some resources specifically targeted to those that were impacted from the wildfires. And there in the corner, you can see a little ad that's running. It was just a quick little short ad that ran on social media. And one of the cool things that I learned that I didn't know existed was something called mobile geofencing. And we were able to use geofencing at a town hall event that was targeted towards wildfire victims. And when they used their phone, the system picked up a little note of who it was. And then we were able to target advertisements and messaging to them through social media, through their news sources that they were getting later on, that we knew were specifically targeted towards those individuals who had attended that event. I don't know who they were, but the digital piece is blinded, but it really allowed us to be more strategic and intentional with our advertisements and making sure that we got that messaging out there. Here's another little ad I'll share with you.
Caring for your farm can be demanding, but the days are even tougher if you're not okay. When the worry won't quit, or the darkness is overwhelming. When you don't feel like yourself and can't see a way out, it's time to speak up. Start today at kansasagstress.org.
I really like that ad because I think a lot of times we think that stress is something that we have to endure by ourselves, or that no one's going to care. But you know what? All we have to do sometimes is talk to a friend and share, or a family member, and share that we're stressed. Chances are they've probably seen it. They've probably seen the fact that we're maybe extra moody, or we're short on our temper. Maybe our homework's not getting done as fast as it normally does. And it's okay to say that we're stressed and we need help. And that's why I think that the advertisement is I think pretty meaningful and awesome, and helps normalize the conversation, in my opinion. So a little bit more about some of the media or some of the other items that we handed out. I mentioned earlier, suicide rates tend to be high in our industry, and that's unacceptable, in my opinion. So As I mentioned, that we have access to firearms, it's also very important that we have access to safety mechanisms. One of those, we were able to provide gun locks to individuals who asked for them. And as of, sorry, this slide's a little dated. I missed updating that. But as of June, we had sent out almost 2,000 orders, and we have now sent out over 6,000 gun locks that we have sponsored and promoted via the website and just through social media. So hopefully those gun locks are going to use because if there's a gun lock in place, that decision to maybe use it for means that are other than hunting slows us down just that much more. And they've proven that that is a help as a deterrent as we maybe make that quick decision to utilize that in an unhealthy way. Promotional items, you can see some of those stress balls there. Obviously we're trying to talk to farmers and ranchers and people in agriculture. So what do? We targeted them with stress balls or objects in shapes of agriculture. It's been fun to try to track down the various types of shapes that we can come up with. And there in the background, I don't know if you can tell it, but that little gray bump is actually a buffalo. So I looked very hard for a purple tractor as we tried to distinguish different types of tractors, but I have not found that yet. But we've handed out over 2,000 stress balls throughout the summer months, and we've got some more that we'll be distributing this fall. I'm just going to skim over these details, but as we can see here, the website is getting a lot of attraction and interest. We've had over 25, almost 26,000 visits just in 2022 alone. The average time is 16 minutes on the website. And so if you think about when you're scrolling on social media or when you're checking out websites, 16 minutes is a long time. So what that tells me is that there's actually helpful resources out there, which is awesome feedback. And this is really neat too. Of course, we've been targeting Kansas, but I'm proud to say that we have visits from our website in every state except Vermont. So if you go to Vermont, please check out our website while you're there. But we have them internationally, and obviously that's concentrated in the state of Kansas, but these resources that we are promoting are not exclusive just to Kansans. So I'm pleased to see that there's interest across the country. Then just to mention a few things about our partners. So I mentioned that we've had lots of different partners. You can see the list here, everything from K-State Research and Extension to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. The Kansas Department of Agriculture typically doesn't work with the Kansas Department for Children and Families, but yet obviously this is an area that they work in, and we were excited to partner with them and make new partnerships and new strategic leverages, because when we work together, we can do bigger and greater things than we do them alone. So I'm very pleased for the support that we've received across the agricultural community, across new partnerships in the realm of our health and supporting our families. So with that, I know I have rambled and talked a little bit, but Robin, I will pause now for some questions, and I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Yes, if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to type those in the chat, or also please turn your camera on. That way we know you have a question and we can call on you. I was going to note, if any of you participated in the lead challenge last year, you may have likely gotten one of those stress balls. So I'd encourage you to look and see if you had picked one of those up last year, see where that's at. Kelsey, I actually did have a question for you. If I see, or if one of our participants happen to see somebody who we feel is stressed, what is a way to start that conversation or to maybe suggest a resource to someone?
Yeah. You know what, Robin, one of the things that I've learned, and I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. I am not a medical professional. I'm an economist. I'm a farmer and rancher. But you know what? Checking on our friends and our family and asking, are you okay, can go a long way. A simple conversation can open the door to something meaningful. And I would challenge you to, if someone asks, how are you today? To be sincere, because if we're not sincere with one another, then we're not helping ourselves and we're not helping that next person if they need to have that door open for them. So simple conversation can be very meaningful and can make a very big difference. Because just because we're stressed doesn't mean we have to be stressed by ourselves. Don't be rude, right? We don't want to be rude back, but you know, a conversation is a great place to start. Other areas, you know, stepping away, going for a walk, doing something physical. There's, you know, certainly emotional support, emotional stress management are things. Creating that social network of those people, those confidants, those friends, those family members who you feel trusted to share your true self with is very helpful. Personal space, creating boundaries for yourself, and you know, making sure that you are in a healthy environment, in a secure environment. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but there's certainly support out there to help create that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Deputy Secretary Olson?
All right, I see some of my friends out there. I'm not going to call on anyone. But I know this is somewhat of a heavy subject, but you know what? The truth is, it's not always supposed to be heavy. It doesn't have to be heavy. We can rely on each other. We can support one another through the good times and the bad times. I know when we celebrate something, a success in the show ring, it's always better if there's people around us that we celebrate with. And we're there to support during the hard times too. And sometimes I think we forget that.
Thank you, Kelsey. And if you think of questions, Kelsey does have her information on that slide. If you think of something you'd like to ask later. With that, we will go ahead and close the session for the evening. So we thank you all for participating, and we thank you, Deputy Secretary Olson, for presenting tonight. We appreciate your time. Just a reminder again to go ahead and fill out your participation survey on the KGLS Lead Challenge website. Also, make sure you go there and sign up for your speech time and your mock interview time, and check back there for the additional resources for the rest of the Lead Challenge activities as well. So with that,